Before we dive into this suspenseful story, drop a comment with your city so we can see how far it reaches. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to subscribe my channel. He had arrived at his family's ranch lake just as the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. Darnell had been looking forward to this weekend all week, a chance to escape the constant buzz of the city, the deadlines, the noise. With his camping gear unloaded and a small fire crackling, he felt a rare sense of peace. But that calm was about to shatter in ways he could never have imagined. Minutes after setting up, the sharp sound of tires crunching on gravel made him tense. He looked up, and there, headlights cut through the twilight. Before he could process, a uniformed officer stepped out, hands on his belt, a frown etched across his face. "Evening, sir," the voice was clipped, but there was a tension underlying it, a suspicion that made Darnell's chest tighten. He knew immediately that this wasn't going to be a routine check. Something about the gaze made him instinctively raise his hand slightly, not in fear of what he had done, but in anticipation of what assumptions might be made. What unfolded next would test not just his composure, but his very sense of safety in the place he considered home. How do you stay calm when you know the world already doubts your right to exist, even in your own space? That question would follow him through the night. Darnell was an ordinary man with an extraordinary sense of responsibility. A former military officer turned ranch owner, he had worked tirelessly to maintain his property, ensuring the lake remained a sanctuary for his family and for the wildlife he cared deeply about. The weekends were his refuge, a break from the relentless pace of life in the city. That Friday evening, he had arrived earlier than usual, eager to set up camp, read a few chapters of his favorite book, and let the gentle hum of nature soothe his mind. The lake, reflecting the late sun, was calm, inviting, and entirely his domain, or so he thought. As he unloaded his cooler and set up his small tent, there was no hint that this peaceful routine would unravel in a matter of moments. Little did he know, across the perimeter, a neighbor had noticed his presence and assumed the worst. A phone call was made, and soon, law enforcement would arrive, unaware that the man they were approaching wasn't an intruder or trespasser, but the very owner of the land. The ordinary evening was about to transform into a confrontation that would challenge every expectation, every assumption, and every notion of safety. Darnell's mind remained focused on the task at hand, oblivious to the tension silently creeping toward him, unaware that his right to be there was about to be questioned in a way that highlighted the broader currents of bias that exist in the world. The tires on the gravel road seemed to echo louder with every second as the officer approached Darnell's campsite. There was no greeting, only a demand for identification, a sharpness in the voice that made the calm of the lake feel miles away. Darnell complied, hands steady, though his mind raced. The officer's eyes lingered, scanning him from head to toe, as if sizing up an unspoken threat. Darnell explained politely, mentioning the property boundaries, but the tension only seemed to escalate. Other officers arrived, their presence amplifying the unease. Questions were asked, statements made, assumptions thrown like invisible weights onto his shoulders. At each step, Darnell maintained his composure, aware that any misstep could escalate the encounter beyond control. The confrontation moved from verbal to physical posturing, the officers stepping closer, Darnell standing his ground, the night air thick with unspoken accusations. The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows that mirrored the uncertainty of the situation. His pulse quickened, adrenaline surging, as he realized the absurdity of the scenario. He was being treated as a trespasser on land that was indisputably his own. Every second stretched, every gaze felt like judgment. Then, a neighbor emerged, confirming the land ownership, but the officers still seemed hesitant, caught between protocol and reality. The suspense lingered, every movement carrying the potential to ignite confrontation. How could something so simple, owning land, become a battlefield for bias and misjudgment? As the confrontation reached its peak, Darnell's patience and composure were tested like never before. The officers, still skeptical, stepped closer, voices raised, the air thick with accusation and disbelief. Darnell felt the weight of the injustice pressing down, a mix of anger, frustration, and fear coiling in his chest. He knew the truth, yet the world around him hesitated to acknowledge it. At that moment, the absurdity of the situation collided with the gravity of prejudice, how quickly assumptions can escalate, how identities can be questioned, how rights can be disregarded. He held his ground, unwavering, asserting his presence not with aggression but with the certainty of ownership and integrity. Every fiber of his being was on alert, every breath measured, as he confronted a situation that was simultaneously ridiculous and deeply unjust. And then, finally, clarity emerged. The confirmation of his land ownership settled the immediate confrontation, yet the emotional impact lingered. The officers stepped back, the tension in their posture softening, but the message of the night remained stark: even in your own space, you are not immune to assumptions shaped by race. In that suspended moment, Darnell understood something vital: survival in the face of bias requires not just knowledge of rights, but courage, composure, and the quiet assertion of self. The question remained, unspoken yet palpable: how many others have endured similar encounters, without the knowledge, the resources, or the presence of mind to assert themselves? The tension finally began to dissipate as backup units arrived and the situation slowly came under control. Darnell lowered his hands, his muscles aching from holding himself upright against fear and adrenaline. The officers, now realizing the reality of the property lines and the misunderstanding, stepped back, murmuring among themselves. Relief washed over him, but it was tempered with an unshakable awareness of how quickly assumptions had escalated into confrontation. The night's events would linger in his mind, not just as an isolated encounter, but as a mirror reflecting the deeper currents of bias that shape everyday interactions. As he packed his campsite under the dim glow of the flashlight, Darnell's thoughts drifted to the countless others who had faced similar misjudgments, whose rights, dignity, and safety had been questioned simply because of the color of their skin. The injustice he experienced wasn't merely a matter of personal affront, it was a fragment of a systemic pattern, a reminder of the societal structures that too often equate identity with guilt. Each tree along the lake, each ripple in the water, seemed to whisper the stories of people who had endured similar moments, moments where fear collided with authority, and assumptions overshadowed truth. Darnell realized that survival in this encounter required more than knowledge of property or legal rights. It demanded presence, courage, and an unwavering assertion of self. Yet, he also understood the exhaustion and emotional toll that such vigilance exacts. Returning home that night, he felt a mix of triumph and heaviness, knowing that while he had defended his space and his dignity, the world around him remained unchanged. This was not merely a story of one night, one lake, one encounter. It was emblematic of countless experiences where ordinary life is interrupted by prejudice, where ordinary people must assert their humanity under the gaze of suspicion. The impact of that night would not fade easily. For Darnell, it reinforced the importance of awareness, advocacy, and documenting these realities, while simultaneously reminding him of the fragility of peace when confronted with entrenched bias. And beyond his personal reflection, it served as a message for the wider world: injustices are not always loud or publicized, yet they ripple through lives, communities, and consciousness. How many more times will someone's rights be questioned, their presence challenged, simply because of who they are? How many more nights will ordinary spaces transform into arenas of fear and judgment? The story of Darnell at his own ranch lake stands as a testament not just to one man's endurance, but to the ongoing need for awareness, dialogue, and change. It is a call to recognize the patterns of prejudice, to challenge assumptions, and to ensure that respect and justice are extended to all, regardless of appearance. His experience was personal, yet universal, a mirror reflecting the larger truth: in a world where bias often dictates perception, courage and clarity can claim dignity even in the face of systemic injustice. The question lingers, demanding reflection and action: how long will we let assumptions define reality before we confront them, together?